That's a fabulous achievement.
Yes or no, do you think that massacre was a fabulous achievement that happened under our watch?
That is a ridiculous.
حاضر يا ماما حجي يا رب اجي عندك ادعي لي اجي ماشي يا ماما حاجي.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. Last week, a journalist tweeted about a Republican leader who has been targeting new member of Congress, Ilhan Omar, because she criticized Israel. She responded, quoting an old song title by Puff Daddy. It's all about the Benjamins, meaning money. This so offended the opinion editor of the New York City Jewish newspaper Forward, Batya Ungar Sargon, that she went on a Twitter rampage. On February 10th, Ungar Sargon wrote, "Would love to know who Ilhan of Minnesota thinks is paying American politicians to be pro-Israel, though I think I can guess. Bad form, Congresswoman. That's the second anti-Semitic trope you've tweeted." Now, I had to look up what Ungar Sargon thought was the first one. It was Omar writing, "Israel has hypnotized the world." Now, she wrote that 7 years ago, when Israel was bombing the heck out of Gaza. By the way, how is that an anti-Semitic trope? Israel, last time I looked, was a country. It wasn't the Jews. And what's the problem with hypnotism? There are traditional lies about Jews, that they're all bankers, they try to control the world, puppet masters, and similar garbage. But hypnotists? Give me a break. Anyway, the great sage Chelsea Clinton notices Ungar Sargon's complaint and chimes in, as do some outraged Republicans. And later, Nancy Pelosi gets into the act. In the meantime, Ilhan Omar answers the Forward editor with one word, an acronym actually, AIPAC. Omar is clear. She's not talking about the Jews. She's talking about an actual organization, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. It's an ultra-right-wing leader of the Zionist lobby, which is all involved with, indirectly, supporting or opposing politicians with, and I'm going to use that word, money. So Ungar Sargon, who now sees herself on the national stage, lectures Ilhan Omar. Please learn how to talk about Israel in a non-anti-Semitic way. Sincerely, American Jews. So now Ungar Sargon is speaking for all Jews. The next day, Ungar Sargon wrote a whole article talking about Ilhan Omar's one-word tweet. She claimed her tweet cast AIPAC as a nefarious organization controlling the levers of power, buying politicians with Benjamins, and bribing them to betray American values. It belongs in a Der Stürmer cartoon, not on the Twitter feed of a U.S. Congresswoman. And the article goes on, even warning about genocide. Der Stürmer, by the way, was a Nazi paper of Hitler's Germany. Ungar Sargon tweets something about an octopus with a hook nose, something Representative Omar didn't say or depict at all. Then the Forward editor claims that Jews aren't the real passion behind support for the Israeli government. It's actually 80 million evangelical Christians, or so she says. An Israeli tweets that Representative Omar was right about AIPAC. Later, he expanded it into an article in The Nation. But the heat was on, and feeling it, Omar apologizes. And Ungar Sargon is at last happy. Ungar Sargon was doing her level best to sabotage the growing move among Democrats away from apartheid Israel. This should not be a surprise about her. Here's a screenshot of Ungar Sargon talking at an ADL event last fall. The ADL organizes U.S. police departments to send their officers to Israel for training. My grandfather used to read Forward in Yiddish, so I had a soft spot for the paper. It's only a website now, but occasionally it does some decent investigations. In the Zionist world, it's considered left-wing, so I thought I should cut it some slack. But then I got this email from Forward bragging about how Ungar Sargon is taking on a congresswoman's blatant anti-Semitism. What a pile of manure. Here's a much better Jewish site, jewishcurrents.org. Quite good analysis and the wicked cartoons of Eli Valley. Conclusion: it is not anti-Semitic to talk about supporters of a nasty apartheid state and the money and power that they use. Note, this stuff is not a spat. It matters. A group calling themselves Patriots United is organizing a demonstration against Omar in a Somali neighborhood in Minneapolis this weekend. And as a number of people are taking selfies in support of Congresswoman Omar, here is mine. In this Democracy Now! Footage, you'll see Representative Omar grilling Trump's choice for coup manager in Venezuela, Elliot Abrams.
Right-wing hawk who was convicted in 1991 for lying to Congress during the Iran-Contra scandal, but he was later pardoned by President George H.W. Bush. Abrams defended Guatemalan dictator General Efrain Rios Montt as he oversaw a campaign of mass murder and torture of indigenous people in Guatemala in the 1980s. Rios Montt was later convicted of genocide. Abrams was also linked to the 2002 coup in Venezuela that attempted to topple Hugo Chavez.
On Wednesday, Elliot Abrams was interrupted by protesters soon after he began addressing the House Foreign Affairs Committee.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify on our efforts to restore democracy in Venezuela.
Don't listen to war criminals.
Hold on.
Elliot Abrams supported genocide in Iraq. Elliot Abrams is going to send weapons to Venezuelan right-wing factions to cause a genocide in Guatemala and El Salvador. Join Code Pink and answer coalition. No to Venezuela!
Okay. The chair will remind all persons in the audience that any manifestation of approval or disapproval of proceedings is in violation of the rules of the House and its committees. Mr. Abrams, I apologize. Please continue.
Venezuela is at a crossroads. Over the past month, we've witnessed a massive outpouring of hope and courage and tenacity by the Venezuelan people. We saw it again yesterday as they have taken to the streets to protest a regime that has brought them nothing but poverty and misery and repression. They have placed their hopes in a young, dynamic, and legitimate leader, Juan Guaido, to lead them through a transition to democracy. And we join the Venezuelan people in this effort.
Elliot Abrams, the U.S. Special Envoy to Venezuela, testifying before the House Foreign Affairs Committee, which is chaired by New York Democrat Eliot Engel. Abrams was later questioned by Democratic Congressmember Ilhan Omar of Minnesota.
Mr. Adams, in 1991, you pleaded guilty to 2 counts of withholding information from Congress regarding your involvement in the Iran Contra affair, for which you were later pardoned by President George H.W. Bush. I fail to understand why members of this committee or the American people should find any testimony that you give today to be truthful.
If I can respond to that.
It wasn't a question.
On February,
that was not a question. That was I reserve the right to my time.
It is not right.
That was not a question.
Committee can attack
on February 8th,
who is not permitted to reply.
That was not a question. Thank you for your participation.
Spy
on February 8th, 1982, you testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee about U.S. policy in El Salvador. In that hearing, you dismissed as communist propaganda report about the massacre of El Mozote, in which more than 800 civilians, including children as young as 2 years old, were brutally murdered by U.S.-trained troops. During that massacre, some of those troops bragged about raping a 12-year-old girl before they killed them. Girls before they killed them. You later said that the U.S. policy in El Salvador was a fabulous achievement. Yes or no, do you still think so?
From the day that President Duarte was elected in a free election to this day, El Salvador has been a democracy. That's a fabulous achievement.
Yes or no, do you think that massacre was a fabulous achievement that happened under our watch?
That is a ridiculous question, and I
yes or no?
No.
I will take that as a yes.
I am not going to respond to that kind of personal attack, which is not a question.
Yes or no, would you support an armed faction within Venezuela that engages in war crimes, crimes against humanity or genocide, if you believe they were serving U.S. interest, as you did in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua?
I am not going to respond to that question. I'm sorry. I don't think this entire line of questioning is meant to be real questions, and so I will not reply.
Whether under your watch, a genocide will take place, and you will look the other way because American interests were being upheld, is a fair question, because the American people want to know that anytime we engage a country, that we think about what our actions could be and how we believe our values are being furthered. That is my question. Will you make sure that human rights are not violated and that we uphold international and human rights?
I suppose there is a question in there, and the answer is that the entire thrust of American policy in Venezuela is to support the Venezuelan people's effort to restore democracy to their country. That's our policy.
I don't think anybody disputes that. The question I had for you is that does the interest of the United States include protecting human rights and include protecting people against genocide?
That is always the position of the United States.
Thank you. I yield back my time.
Democratic Congressmember Ilhan Omar of Minnesota questioning Elliot Abrams.
Now that's how to grill, roast, and toast. If you were going to have a conference about Middle East peace and security, where would you have it? Warsaw, Poland is probably not the first place you'd have in mind, but that's what happened this week. It was a U.S. conference whose only purpose was to confront Iran. The big European powers like Germany and France stayed away, but a number of Gulf allies in the Saudi orbit did attend, as did Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu. The purpose of the whole meeting? Well, Netanyahu let the cat out of the bag. He said, "This is an open meeting with representatives of leading Arab countries that are sitting down with Israel in order to advance the common interest of war with Iran." After even the White House was upset with this honesty, the Israeli government claimed he had been mistranslated. But an AP correspondent based in Jerusalem, who knows Hebrew, exposed the lie. Please realize that while Netanyahu wants war, Israel is too far away and way too small to mount a war. It expects its allies, open and secret, to do the bulk of the killing and dying. Now about some of the latest reports on human-caused disasters for the natural world and the world climates.
A new report finds at least a third of the Himalayan ice cap will melt by the end of the century due to climate change, even if the world's most ambitious environmental reforms are implemented. The report, released by the Hindu Kush Himalaya Assessment earlier this month, is a culmination of half a decade's work by over 200 scientists, with an additional 125 experts peer reviewing their work. It warns rising temperatures in the Himalayas could lead to mass population displacement, as well as catastrophic food and water insecurity. The glaciers are a vital source for the 250 million people who live in the Hindu Kush Himalayan range, which spans from Afghanistan to Burma. The region is home to the most ice in the world after Antarctica and the Arctic. More than 1.5 billion people depend on the rivers that flow from the Himalayan peaks.
Meanwhile, an alarming new report has found more than 40% of insect species around the world may become extinct in the next few decades. Although the study's authors point to industrial agriculture as the main culprit, they also lay blame on climate change, citing warming temperatures that have led to sudden decreases in insect population in places like Puerto Rico, where nearly 100% of ground rainforest bugs have disappeared in just 35 years. This devastating news comes as 2018 was found to be the fourth warmest year on record. The past 5 years have been the 5 warmest since reliable measurements began more than a century and a half ago. We go now to Seattle to talk to journalist Dahr Jamal, author of 4 books, including his most recent, The End of Ice, Bearing Witness and Finding Meaning in the Path of Climate Disruption. Dahr was awarded the Martha Gellhorn Prize for Investigative Reporting for his reporting from the Iraq War. Last year, he won an Izzy Award for his ongoing coverage of human-caused climate change. Dahr, welcome back to Democracy Now! Thank you so much for driving 2 hours in a snowstorm to get to Seattle to be with us today. Can you talk about these latest reports of, once again, precedent-setting climate change-related developments in the world?
There are more indications of how far along we already are regarding human-caused climate disruption. Excuse me. They essentially underscore that we are on a warming trend now that's unprecedented, unlike anything that we've ever seen since humans have been on the planet. And it's very disconcerting. We can really look across the globe and see these giant alarm bells, like the melting of the glaciers in the Himalaya, the collapse of insect populations, which that same report said, at the current trajectory, assuming we don't speed up, or these trends don't speed up, which they may well do that, we could lose all insects by 2100. If we look at what's happening to glaciers in the United States, just in the contiguous 48 states, in Glacier National Park, the lead expert there told me that we could probably not have any glaciers left whatsoever in Glacier National Park by just 2030. That's just 11 years from now. He went on to say, along with several other experts, which is that there could be no glaciers left anywhere in the contiguous 48 at all by 2100. And then think about the implications of this, not just for, of course, the natural implications on ecosystems, which are massive, but like the Hindu Kush, so many people depend on these glaciers for drinking water and irrigation. So these alarm bells are ringing very, very loudly all around us, and that's really just a few of the overt ones right now.
Well, Dahr, in your new book, you talk about, at one point you say, as a species, we now hang over the abyss of geoengineered future we have created for ourselves. At our insistence, our voracious appetite is consuming nature itself. We've refused to heed the warnings Earth has been sending, and there is no rescue team on its way.
From Middle East Eye, a Palestinian girl in a hospital in Bethlehem, unable to get visits from her mother who is in Gaza.
بحبها كتير أنا. هي تحبني كتير. تشتاقني هي.
حاضر يا ماما حجي يا رب اجي عندك ادعي لي اجي ماشي يا ماما حاجي هلا ماشي حاضر لو بايدي الامر لو بايدي الامر لا ما تعطيش ان شاء الله انا حكون عندك. نص الليل بعتوا رسالة للمرافقة إنه أنت تم قبولك والأم والأب تم رفضهم يعني. فكانت يعني كتير صعبة علي إنه هذه بنتي أنا لازم أسافر معها. الطفل الحضنة الأولى للطفل هي الأسرة الأم والأب. وطفلة خبرة جديدة يعني مرضها بحد ذاته صدمة عليها وعلينا كلنا.
They are giving permissions just to older people to come with these children. So that's a very critical issue because we are dealing either with old women that coming with children, and sometimes these children do not know very well these people that coming with them.
البنت هذه يعني هي مريضة حتتعب بزيادة لأن والدتها مش معاها. وأنا كمان في نفس الوقت أنا مريضة. يعني كيف بيطلعوا مع مريضة مع مريضة.
بحب أروح على بيت اللحم. بحب عند ماما في البيت.
There was a really fine film last week called Stitching Palestine at the Palestine Museum, U.S. in Woodbridge, Connecticut. 12 Palestinian women talk in the movie about their lives and about Palestinian embroidery. Frankly, I was a little reluctant to see the film. Sewing doesn't interest me. But it was not at all dull. The stories of loss and resistance were gripping, and I got an appreciation for the stitching that makes up embroidery. Here's the film's trailer.
وين ربيت؟ بالقدس. أنا كتير قدسية.
أنا ما تركت، هم تركونا.
فكرت إنه رح أروح ل6 أشهر فقط. وانغرمت بفلسطين.
بس طبعا هم رايحين على أساس إنه بدهم يرجعوا مثل باقي الناس وضلوا هون.
كل يوم أنا مروحة هيك بهدي السيارة شوي بطلع على القدس هيك باخد نفس غميق بقول عشان هيك أنا هون. And I think that everything wrong in the world you can see in Palestine, whether it's racism, discrimination, economic segregation.
كانوا يتجمعوا النسوان قدام البيوت بفلسطين.
I want to see my house. No, madam, this is our house. We have bought it.
Because you know very well that this is a Palestinian house and that we...
نحن بالقدس بذكرونا بوجود الاحتلال كل يوم لأنه القمع مستمر كل يوم.
My father built this house.
عندي توب فلسطيني مخبى على طول بالخزاني.
أهم الناس اللي بحياتي صاروا صور. بحبهم كتير لأنهم غير متطلبين.
بتذكر هذه اللحظة إنه هذا مش إلكم، اللي إلكم بفلسطين بحيفا.
يعني هذه نفس الأم اللي قدرت تشتغل بالسر تعيش عائلة، اللي قدرت تواجه الجيش لما أجوا مرة وأخذوا يضربوا أبوي.
هذه بلدي وأنا ماشي مثل أكني فارة بهالبلد.
I remember my mother never stopped crying. من أول الطريق لآخر الطريق.
You can see the film for the next few weeks at the Palestine Museum, which is open Sundays 1 to 5. Admission is always free. Look up palestinemuseum.us. Speaking of the Palestine Museum, some new acquisitions. That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller for The Struggle.